Hey everybody, so I'm turning 60 today, so I'm celebrating by taking the day off from the news, and instead I'm going to talk about something really more basic and maybe a little bit more controversial than usual. And it's going to get pretty obnoxious at the end, if I'm honest. In the last 2 minutes of this video, I'm going to replay what I think is maybe one of the best things I've done on this channel from 2.5 years ago, and it's for sure the most intentionally silly thing that I ever did. So you can skip ahead and watch if you want, but it'll make a lot more sense and it'll be a little funnier, I think, if I have to say it myself. It'll be a little bit funnier if you listen for a few minutes to what I'm going to say here about MAGA theology first. And so I'm going to make my points quickly here because they are important, and I do mean what I'm saying here. And I don't think they need a ton of explanation. The best, by the way, birthday present you could give me is to watch the whole video, to click like and subscribe to the feed. And I rarely ask for people to do that because we've already got a really high engagement level here, a lot higher engagement numbers on this channel than average because you guys already do those things here. So anyway, thank you for that. But now here's my main point today. It's simply this. You can trust your gut. MAGA theology really is as dumb as it looks. And so there, I said it. And I've got a couple of really simple subpoints to that. And I'll get into all these. But subpoint 1 is simply this. By their fruits, you'll know them. And subpoint 2 is a personality cult, by definition, can't be exposed without some what people would call ad hominem criticisms. And so I'm going to support both of those statements, kind of quickly because it's my birthday, but that kind of quickness about it, the superficiality, is a little bit part of my point today too. And so you'll see what I mean. I know right away that people are going to ask, what do you mean by MAGA theology? MAGA is a political movement. It's not a religious movement. And strictly speaking, even strictly speaking, that's only partly true. But as I've pointed out 100 times on this channel, people who call themselves Christians are the heart of the MAGA movement. And if Christians abandoned that movement, it would wither on the vine almost instantly. It's a political movement that feeds on the fears and the petty hatreds of people who feel, I think, left behind by the pace of change in our culture. They feel, many of them, like they're losing their place of preeminence in the culture. And the vast majority do identify as some kind of Christian. So here's what I mean by MAGA theology. I mean, any of the various theologies that are providing the justification for what Trump's movement is doing. And they all ascribe to some type of Christian nationalism. And right now, they're all lined up in support of Donald Trump. They see him as a vehicle for achieving power, and he sees them as a vehicle for achieving power. And these very different religious groups that support him see each other as a temporary vehicle for achieving power. But if they ever do achieve the ultimate heights of power that they want, which they won't, because the people using them will never actually give them that ultimate power. But if they ever did achieve ultimate power, then the long knives would come out for each other because the whacked theologies behind all these movements are kind of mutually exclusive from each other. They're all whacked in different ways, and they often even view each other as heretics by and large. So, for example, two groups that are super powerful right now with the Trump administration, we've talked about both of them on this channel. There's two of them. The first is the new apostolic reformation types, and those are the hyper-spiritualized false prophets and grifters like Paula White, who heads Trump's White House Faith Office or whatever we're calling that right now. And the second is Doug Wilson's group out of Moscow, Idaho, which Pete Hegseth is a part of. So these are two versions of dominionist theology, but they get there in very different ways. And the weird pseudo-Christian utopias that each one of those groups would envision are really very different from each other. And only one of those groups could ultimately get their way in the end. So if you want to know what prompted this video, someone left a comment last night on a video that I made with Amy Hawk about a series that we're doing on that Doug Wilson movement out of Moscow, Idaho that I just mentioned. The guy who commented is not a Trump supporter, and he was super disappointed with our video about Wilson. He was disappointed in what he considered the lack of intellectual rigor that I showed in that video yesterday. And he mentioned some scholar who apparently did a much better job of critiquing Wilson's theology in like 40-some pages or whatever, which I wasn't even trying to do, by the way. I was mocking Wilson and his theology. I wasn't critiquing his theology. But anyway, I don't remember the scholar's name. It was something like Clifford Krusty Pants. And apparently this guy, Clifford Krusty Pants, did a long theological takedown of Doug Wilson's theology. And my commenter said something like, I finally thought I found a channel that would intelligently criticize Donald Trump, but it turns out I'll have to keep looking, something like that. And he accused me of using ad hominem attacks against Doug Wilson. So I thought, well, this is a really good opportunity, especially since I'm officially old and wise as of today. It's a good opportunity to let people know what I think about this stuff and how it relates to what I'm trying to accomplish here on this channel. So here's one thing. Seriously, I'm never trying to sound intelligent, but I'm always trying to be helpful. If I ever do sound intelligent, it's strictly by accident. I preached every Sunday for years to a church of people that I loved, and they came from very mixed educational backgrounds. Every Sunday, I spoke to people who had never graduated high school, and I also spoke in the same sermon to PhDs and MDs and engineers and every other educational background. And all I ever wanted to do when I was speaking to them was to help. Like specifically, I wanted to help all of them wherever they were coming from. I wanted to help all of them to develop the mind of Christ. So that experience permanently shaped my communication style. So now on this channel, I'm trying to help my listeners. And what I'm trying to help is for my listeners to stand confidently when you're criticized by theological bullies, whether in your families or your churches or in the media. But I do have a very specific way of doing that. I do talk about the Bible when necessary, and I do talk about theology when I see theology being used to hurt people. But my goal isn't to fill my listeners up with enough theology, for instance, to win a debate with someone like Doug Wilson. You would have to look elsewhere for that, because Doug Wilson's theology is destructive, I believe. And every minute that most people would spend reading it, even to refute it, that's a minute that they spent inside what I consider a very dark and deceptive worldview. I think a few people need to take one for the team, obviously, and sacrifice their lives or, a certain number of years to studying that, to doing that miserable work. But Doug Wilson, in my opinion, and again, he's just an example, is a malevolent force in our churches. And I'm not making videos to go deep into his theology. I'm making videos to expose his fruit. And just like the one yesterday, this one isn't about specifics. That's what the upcoming series is for. But today I want to firmly push back just on this idea even of wading through reams of toxic theology in order to refute it. When Jesus told us we can examine the fruit. I think that Wilson and his protégés are conceited and understand nothing using biblical terms. They have an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words. And I don't think it's healthy to focus too much on those words. Examine the fruit. Wilson covers his fruit with hundreds of thousands of words that he's written about theology, and his acolytes have written millions more. And they all read each other's stuff and they comment on it. And when people try to criticize what they're putting out there, they've got this kind of junior high sort of debate me, bro mentality. But no one can win that debate without immersing yourself in the same cesspool that they're swimming in. And this is true not just of them, but a lot of other Christian nationalist movements and really any other fringy religious movements in general. But I'm talking specifically about Wilson today as an example. These guys in his movement, they all read the same books, and they say things like, well, how do you reconcile your brash contention with Milford Mudbottom's core argument from chapter 3 of his 2014 book, Toward a Biblical Hermeneutic of Master-Slave Relations Within a Post-Millennial Paradigm? And the mistake that people make is to go read Milford Mudbottom's stupid book so they can respond intelligently, instead of just stepping back for a minute and realizing, wow, so this is what theological inbreeding sounds like. Doug Wilson and a lot of people like him surround themselves with this fetid swamp of theological muck, like the Dead Marshes by Mordor. And they want to make people navigate their way through all that sludge before they can dare criticize them. And it's just deadly. And while we're trying to sort through their endless words and controversies, meanwhile, they're pushing a false macho version of manhood out to young people, and they're supporting an authoritarian takeover of our government. And now Pete Hegseth, one of their guys, is Secretary of Defense. Their theology is a distraction. This is about power, and it's a waste of intellect to try to engage on the theological level. All it does is play into the farce that these are somehow serious Christians. So I'm just saying, don't take the bait, and don't be intimidated by their endless words about something that they call God. They worship Western culture. Their goal is patriarchal domination by white men, using Christian language as a tool for coercion. And right now, their primary fruit is a movement of people who love their neighbors far less than they did before they joined that movement, and a whole lot of victims of abuse, and a corrupt, buffoonish, anti-Christian president in the Oval Office. But anyway, to repeat my point, you can trust your gut. MAGA theology really is as stupid as it looks. And my first subpoint, by their fruits you will know them. So now just quickly for subpoint 2, a personality cult by definition can't be exposed without ad hominem criticisms. So I'm not going to get into whether Doug Wilson's group technically is a personality cult or not, but I'm making a broader point here. The MAGA movement definitely is. One thing that's true about both movements is this. They both are led by a person whose personality is far more important than their stated beliefs. We know this about Trump already, but Wilson is a similar person. He makes himself the center of the argument. He glories in being a bad boy. He loves angering people by making transgressive statements and then saying, this is just true, whether it's politically correct or not. And so I've seen him over the years make videos like to introduce a controversial series of talks where he'll be sitting in a chair, for instance, while a house burns down around him, or the truck that he's driving ends up catching on fire. And it's all meant to signal, we're saying dangerous stuff. We're really going to make people angry with the truths that we're sharing this month. And I could give other examples, but the point is, the theology is a cover for what's really just a personality-driven movement that's all about power. It's a transgressive movement, and people love that stuff. So whether we're talking about Trump or Doug Wilson, we just have to deal with the personality. We have to deal with the public image that they're putting out there, whether that public image is real or just a tool to gain power. So yeah, that does involve ad hominem criticisms, which just mean criticisms against the person. Ad hominem attacks are considered a logical fallacy because they distract from the argument that somebody's making. But when you're dealing with a personality-driven movement, you just have to criticize the personality. That's why I think it's so hilarious when people still, in 2025, after all we've seen, leave comments saying things like, well, I like Trump for his policies, attack his policies. And his policies change every day based on what he ate the night before and what he's watched most recently on Fox News. His personality is his policy. His character is his policy. And I'd say the same about someone like Doug Wilson. His theology is a pretense. What he's after is power. His movement wants power. And they're motivated by his unapologetic way of going after that. So that's all that I had to say about that. So now for the silly part. One of Doug Wilson's associates, Stephen Wolfe, wrote a book that some people took seriously a few years ago called The Case for Christian Nationalism. And I made a couple videos about it back then, and I made a lot of the same points that I just made. And I criticized the way that he admitted to not using much scripture in a book called The Case for Christian Nationalism. So in that video 2.5 years ago, back when I was in my 50s, I said that his method of argument was basically natural law plus Reformed theology equals whatever Wolfe wants. And I criticized the way he used syllogisms like the following. 1, civil government ought to direct its people to the true religion. 2, the Christian religion is the true religion. Therefore, civil government ought to direct its people to the Christian religion. And so after reading a whole book of that kind of nonsense, I had enough. So I ended that video with this little skit. So anyway, enjoy and thanks for listening. So now I've probably said everything useful that I'm going to say about this, but nonetheless, I did prepare a few minutes here of a short skit just to give you a feeling of what it feels like to read this book in case you're not going to read it. So I apologize for the stock photos. I wanted to give it exactly the amount of respect that it deserved, but I can't wear hand puppets and run the keyboard. So I had to use the stock photos. Okay, here we go. Hello, we're looking to buy a car. As well you should, for doesn't nature itself teach us that humans need to get from here to there? I suppose. And having established that, simple reason tells us the best way to get from here to there is in a private motor vehicle, because private motor vehicles give you the maximum independence. They're available at will. Maybe in a place without public... And now, having established that, we can confidently assert that the best personal vehicle is one that can hold an entire family and all of their belongings. Doesn't it? And having established that, no one can deny that the ideal family unit in the eyes of God is a father, a mother, and at least 8 children. So, if you want a specifically Christian vehicle, it better be quite large. Wait, what? And moreover, given the absolute collapse of Christian culture, your vehicle must be able to store enough rations and weaponry to outlast a prolonged persecution. And having proven this point beyond any reasonable objection, it now becomes obvious that the only Christian way to travel is by personal bus. Personal bus? Now, don't question me on this, because I'm an expert on buses. I've studied buses for years. Now, as every reputable expert on buses will tell you, the golden age of the bus was the 1940s, that sweet spot when the technology was advanced, but the nanny state hadn't kicked in yet with all these feminine ideas of comfort and woke safety features. Do you even know the significance of March 8th, 1950? Of course you don't. That's the day the first tiny little VW bus went into production. At first, only degenerates drove VW buses, so people thought, well, what's the harm? But before long, someone from your own town started driving them. Then someone from your church accepts a ride in one. Well, what's the harm? Next, your daughter's dating a guy with a VW bus. Oh, they're just kids. They'll outgrow it. What's the harm? But now, some parts of the country, it seems like every other vehicle's a VW bus. But anyway, you look like a man who knows where to draw the line. And have I got the vehicle for you? I just happen to have it here on the lot. This is the only vehicle a good Christian man like yourself should be driving. Well, actually, we're looking for a car for me to drive. You see, I'm a real estate agent, and I'm looking for something comfortable but economical. Wait, what? You let her drive? You can both kindly leave my lot right now and take your woke BS with you. This is Northern Idaho, not San Fran frickin' Cisco. And scene.